Hi, Pulkit.
Hi, Jatin. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Amazing. I mean, it's been years since we caught up, so thanks for calling me.
Well, for the viewers, Pulkit, so I had an opportunity to work on Pulkit stories. We connected maybe 3 years ago, and
6 years ago, actually.
for a long time. And Pulkit is an example of somebody who had a tough choice of joining ISB versus an Ivy League. And I remember, Pulkit, when you started with us, you had the top US MBA, the Ivy League schools in mind. You said, Jatin, that's where I'm headed. That's where the goal is. And once you had both the options at the end, and you chose something that surprised me. And I said, you know what? He came with the mindset. I wasn't surprised because Ivy League is over, ISB, no, but you were very, very focused.
Yeah.
And you had ISB and the other ones later. Now, I'm very, very curious to ask you, and I think even the viewers would want to understand, Pulkit, what parameters did you use to evaluate these two, and what made you choose ISB over an Ivy League US MBA?
Sure. Makes sense. And, I remember when I initially thought that I wanted to do an MBA, I was like, my one of my core goals was that, yes, I want to get out of India and I want international exposure in my job role. And that's the only way to grow. Like, that was the mindset with which I wanted to get in and do an MBA. And then I actually didn't give it too much thought at that point of time because there were other problems to solve, like studying for the GMAT, prepping for the interviews, building my resume. So there's just so much going on in my mind that I actually didn't take a lot of time to think out what should have been the basic first step, right? Like, where do I want to go? Yes, I went with my instinct thinking that, everybody's going global and that's where I want to go. And that's where my career will go. So when I actually got through the entire admin process and essays and working through everything, and when happily I landed a few admit emails in my inbox, and ISB, by the way, was always a backup option that in case I couldn't get through either the European or the American business schools, ISB is a great school in India to go for, right? Uh, but then I started getting these admit and rejection emails, and finally, when it narrowed down, like I had 4 or 5 schools to choose from, it was a very tough decision, a great problem to have, but a very, very tough decision. What I did consider, and I gave it a thought with my wife and my family, and I also remember coming down to your office and having this chat with you, wherein you nicely explained the financials to me as well. But ultimately, it all boiled down to 4 factors for me. I think the first hard question which I asked myself was that where do I actually want to work in the long run? Right? So it's not a 1 year, 2 year problem. Where would I want to grow, rise, become a leader in the next 10 years? And where can I do it faster? So is it US? Is it Europe? Is it APAC? Is it India? What I did realize was that all said and done, uh, I do want to stay closer to home. And APAC is probably a region which I actually saw rising faster at that point of time. Uh, So that was the first factor which I considered, right? And I narrowed down to this region and maybe India for that perspective. The second one was more personal, but it was more about where would I want to live, settle, have a family, be closer to my parents, so on and so forth. Where would I have more friends? So that was a purely personal decision. It can vary for anybody, but what I did realize was that, I want to stay closer to home. I'm not very detached from my family, so probably I want to stay closer to my home. The third thing was purely financial. It was more about how much could I afford to pay or get a loan for my education. And of course, scholarships matter in this as well. Like, they're a nice little incentive to bump you in either direction. With me, I didn't have a lot of scholarship. The only one which I had was from a European school, and that was probably 25%. But that just wasn't enough to probably bump me in that direction.
Okay.
So basically, I did a financial calculation thinking that how many years can I pay back my loan? It was roughly the same, by the way, in India and in the US. It was not very different because ISB's fees in per capita terms is almost equal to the ROI that you'll get in the US.
Okay.
But there was another factor, which was like, I also would have moved with family, right? So my wife had a stable, decent job in India. She would have had to give that up. So that was the swing factor in my decision, just financially. And then lastly, I don't know where I got this foresight, but the year that I was supposed to join was 2015. and 2016 was election year for the US. So and I connected with a few alums in US schools as well, and they said, and some very wise alum from Cornell told me that, it's very easy to get a job because it's a grade B school, but there can be one swing factor, which is that there's election year. So companies might just be a bit more conservative with visas. So I think basically I just considered these four factors, and based on all of this, I decided that, what, let's go in for ISB.
Awesome. And can you talk more about how did ISB have an impact on your capabilities, Pulkit? What you do now versus what you were. So how was the transformation experience at ISB?
Sure. So I think ISB is a 1-year program in India, and I think so I've not been to a USB school, right? But I think what I find different from my standard traditional education in India is that it's probably 2 years crunched into one, and it's very, very intense. So all said and done, I think it does prepare you for how your life post ISB is going to be work-wise.
Okay.
I think for me personally, the four areas where it really helped me, I think the first thing which an intense 1-year MBA taught me was prioritization. Like time is literally of the essence over there. What I learned was very early in ISP, like as early as the first orientation week, that it's all about saying no when needed. Like everywhere is about prioritization, even in ISP, whether it is choosing which subjects you want, choosing what case competitions you want to participate in, what sports you want to play, club meetings, study group chats, having a social life. I was married, so managing my personal life, getting a job, getting good grades, what parties to attend, how much you should drink so that you're not hungover in the next class, what networking events you should go to, and what are worth them. So the first thing it taught me was prioritization, like hands down, which I think almost every intense MBA program does. So ISB probably was not very different in that perspective. The second thing which ISB taught me was leadership. And when I say leadership, it's not in formal positions of authority, but it's more about leading with influence or leading your peers. So ISB has a really cool way of electing the graduate student bodies and the club presidents. It's an election, so it's exactly like a political election that you see in India. The faculty is not involved at all. It's all student driven. They vote for you and they elect you as a president, and it happens in the very first month. So basically, I think what it taught me was leadership amongst my peers. So I was fortunate enough to be elected as the president of the consulting club at a consulting B school. Like, I mean, ISB traditionally known as a feeder. There was a lot of expectation management because like 500 out of the 840 people in my class wanted to get into consulting.
Must
So
have been competitive.
it was very tough. And then I had like a core team. So the president then interviews, elects the core team. So I had 10 peers in my core team, and a lot of them were at least 5 years older to me. So the fine art of managing without authority is what I learned secondly at ISP. The third thing was the peer group. I know it sounds like a cliche and every MBA school has this story, but I was in the Hyderabad campus, 550 plus highly intelligent, competitive people in one campus. Very collaborative also, I mean, but there's always competition. Even for India, it was very diverse. Like in my own study group of 5 people, I had a para commando, a trauma surgeon, and a merchant navy sailor. And what that does is it's a very humbling experience, but it also encourages you to bring out your best self. When you see all of these rock stars with you, you very early realize that you can't be them. So you might as well bring your best self every single day. And it also helps you respect diversity, by the way. So the peer group. And then lastly, I think never underestimate the power of the ISB alumni network. Like it's opened so many doors for me. I mean, they've prepped me for interviews, got me business contacts, hung out for drinks randomly. So I think those four things: prioritization, leadership, peer group, and then the network is what ISB gave me in a nutshell.
There is one more. So that's very, very effective. There's one more I want, and I was curious. You worked in risk management.
Yeah.
And you moved to Google. It's a complete shift in 10, 11 months. And there are a lot of people who come. So when I work with a lot of people applying for 1-year MBA programs and ISB, and they say, can I make a significant shift in my career?
Sure.
How did that happen? So walk us through, make us understand. How was that turnaround in the career? Yeah.
Sure, interesting. So I think I'll stick to something which you taught me 6 years ago, that your pre-MBA skills plus whatever you acquire in your MBA is equal to is going to help you land your post-MBA career, right? So the first thing what I actually did was take a inventory, and this was also during the prep process of what were my pre-MBA skills. Yes, I was in risk management, but what were those transferable skill sets that I have taken from that job that I can leverage during my MBA, but also
What
post
goals
my
did you
MBA?
and I create, Pulkit? I don't remember.
Uh, I had a very clear MBA goal of getting into consulting after my MBA for 3 years,
Okay.
and then thinking of doing my own stuff. But it's funny how goals change. So
Please,
we
please carry on. Yes.
yeah, but even at that point of time, what I realized was that even for a consulting career, some of the transferable skill sets that I had was like basically my interpersonal skills. Like even in risk management, I had chatted with clients, right? And then I also had an analytical mind. I mean, I'm not boasting, but I like to I like to think I was pretty analytical even before joining an MBA skill. So I knew where I stood in terms of my skill set. What I really wanted, and here is where I actually saw ISB helping me. I did not have that connect. So talking to people in various companies and figuring out what really suits me, I think that alumni connect is what ISB gave me. I could have always used LinkedIn and reached out on my own, but that's not as effective as being from the same brotherhood or being from the same network. The second thing which I think really helped me, there's this kick-ass course called Negotiation at ISB. So that course to me was a gold mine. It was a gold mine from my job interviews. It teaches you all about what you have to give up, and so again it's about prioritization, right? So it teaches you how to pick and choose. It was a gold mine for me to navigate my interviews and the entire placement process. So I think that was the second thing which I realized, my negotiation skill. The third thing which ISB offered me was access to these tier one companies, right? Because all said and done in India, it's not very easy on your own to make a very drastic career shift from risk management to something like a McKinsey, BCG, Google. It's very, very difficult. And I think ISB gave me that access because of the sheer number of people, and all of these companies come on campus. The fourth thing how ISB helped was the placement prep process. So it's all student driven, but you would be amazed by how structured it is. Like it's you have case prep, you have consulting prep, you have all of these clubs that I was talking about. The consulting club which I ran, for example, they actually reach out to alumni. So once the placement process starts, every weekend alumni come down. They make you, I mean, all of these consulting alums come down. They make you go through casework. They review your resume. So it's like a really close fraternity in that placement prep process. And then lastly, I think grades. So all said and done, never underestimate the power of grades. And I think your that's basically your core job even at an MBA, to do a decent job even in your coursework. So I think those are the five things which probably ISP helped me make that transition.
So there's an interesting distinction, 1 year versus 2 year MBAs. And a lot of people, when they come for understanding what kind of schools they are exploring, and I actually assess their current understanding of goals as well. But I put ISB in a very different, unique position because it's an Indian program. So even if it's a 1 year MBA, you don't have to get used to a different culture. You don't have to, even if you don't have an understanding of your goals, and you're going to one of the European programs, you have 4 years of work experience. You don't know, should I look for a career or should I get used to spending time with people from five different nationalities? But given all that, I will still a 1 year MBA. How will, and it really goes at a fast pace. Amazing program going at a fast pace. What message do you have for people who come with 2 to 3 years of work experience and I know are confused
Sure.
of what they want to do? Did you have classmates, they were kind of confused, who didn't know what they were thinking, and the moment they got in, they were like 10 months away from graduating? How will I treat them?
Interesting question. So I mean, I was one of the confused ones, by the way, and I can talk about that. But I think
Had
one
to
thing
be,
which I
I trained you, you had to be confused. I'm sorry. Please carry on.
yeah, I mean, it was, as I said, it's insane how fast goals can change. So, but that said and done, I think one thing which I realized very early into ISP, and even before getting into ISP, when I connected with alums, you should have fair enough expectation settings, right? So it's only when your expectations don't hit reality is where you have this cognitive dissonance. But what they told me was, be real, aim to change only one of the following. Either you could change your industry, either you can change your geography internationally, either you can change your role slash job profile, or you could change your seniority in the same company.
Interesting.
And some people just want to go and change their pay, so that's optional. And so I think what they told me that you should aim to change one. You're very lucky if you could change two, and nobody changes three. So that
Okay.
was a very good framework for me to go into it. And that actually helped me narrow down as to what I wanted to change. Like, what were the top two things which I wanted to change? I wanted to change my industry and I wanted to change my role. Everything else could come at a later stage. So that said and done, when I got into ISB, I was very confused. I did not know what I wanted to do. So I defaulted and said that I'll do a little bit of everything and I'll get into consulting for 2-3 years. And then I'll figure out what I want to do and buy more time. So that's why I actually, that was also, by the way, one of the swing factors for me for ISB, because I know it's a feeder school for consulting companies as well. That is why I joined the consulting club. I ran for elections, whatever, became the president. And then I started interacting with consulting alumni, and I realized that's exactly what I don't want to do. So I don't want 16-hour work days. I don't want to spend 5 days outside of my home location. It gives you great exposure, but somehow I'm a very balanced person. So consulting then became my backup plan instead of my primary goal. But
Interesting.
I have a few tips which I learned over that 10 months to getting a safe landing. And how can you do like this career shift after MBA?
All yours. Yep. Please.
So I think the first thing, and I can't harp about it enough, is be smart, like choose well. You have limited counters. So counter is like basically one interview, you get one token. So you have limited 10 tokens in the placement process. So be smart, choose well. Second is, but don't be too choosy. Like sometimes you should be open to a reality check. If you're not getting placed by day zero, day one, day two, don't be too choosy. Ultimately, you need a job and you need to pay off that loan.
Okay.
So it's fine. I
What
mean, seriously.
is the counter, Pulkit?
So a counter basically is when you get into, so ISB has this, it used to have this day system. So day zero, day one, day two, which is placement day one, companies come in, these fixed days. And for any day, any individual applicant can have up to 10 counters, which means that they can be in the placement process for 10 companies.
Wow.
So that's quite a lot, but you'll be surprised as to how soon you run out of counters. You want to apply to every company and get job. So
Okay.
and and it becomes very insane to manage 10 interviews on one day. So but we can talk about that like one post admin stage.
Okay.
but,
Okay.
but yeah, like what I meant was that be smart, don't be too choosy. Dream companies don't happen to everybody, but you should be open, always have backups. And if all else fails, just getting a decent paying job is not a bad option at all. Like you should just remember your ISB degree opens doors forever. A campus placement is just the starting, it's not the end goal. So I think if you keep that in mind, I think you should be able to get a decent landing after ISB as well.
And so, by the way, 10 interviews in one day, it really sounds fantastic, man. At least people are getting a lot of opportunities. I'm so glad to hear that. I remember back at Darden, I think in first year, when I was looking for internships, I did a total of 6 or 7, maybe 8 interviews. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and that too spread across maybe 1 month, one and a
Wow.
half month. Yeah, yeah. But so you're saying 10 counters in one day, and if you have 3 days, you're getting what, 30 counters in 3 days?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a maximum. So what it also means is that there's a shortlisting process that happens after this, and like not everybody gets to utilize their full counters because
Okay.
so it's complicated, but it's a rolling process. So let's say 2 months before day zero, the application portal opens, and you get 10 counters. You can apply to 10 companies. You have to wait for one company to either reject you or put you out of the process to apply to the 11th. So you get your counter back if you're out of the process.
Awesome. I really learned amazing things today. Pulkit, seriously. Now,
It's a yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 seriously. See, as I said, You people move out of the MBA consulting process, you grow, come back and you teach us. It's a great learning exposure.
It's paying forward. It's paying it forward. I won't call it
Thank
teaching, but
you.
yeah.
Thank you. What suggestions do you have for people who are looking at ISB? Somebody comes over and says, what tips do you have? What things do you should I be telling people if somebody says, hey, I'm interested in ISB, blank, and I want to get
Okay.
suggestions do you have for somebody who's really keen on getting into ISB?
Okay. So a couple of things, right? And I'm assuming this is the pre-admit process that we were talking about at
Yeah,
this stage.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I think the first thing is you should have one spike in your profile or one standout section in your profile, right? So what they say is like, you can, so there are basically your resume or your profile is three sections. It's WorkX, it's academics, and it's your extracurriculars, right? So you should have one spike in the three. And either you have stellar WorkX, either you have excellent academics, or you have rockstar extracurriculars. So that is the first thing. And what I would also recommend people is that, don't get intimidated by this word spike or having or being stellar. I would actually encourage people to think about it really hard. I'm sure every one of us has done amazing things. And it's just about reflecting and getting them out. And that's where I remember you really helped me because, when I started my MBA journey, I was like, look at these people, man. I mean, they've done amazing work and they've gotten into MBAs. And how do I even stand a chance? But then you actually helped me reflect and you taught me that, everybody has stellar stories. It's just about, bringing them out. So I think that's my first recommendation to people that think about that one spike. The second one would be again, and this is just me, but I'm like I'm somebody who believes in covering your bases really well. So I would suggest prep well for your GMAT. Like a good score is not everything to get an admit, but it does indicate your academic ability. I mean, it's a proxy. So I didn't have great grades in my 10th and 12th. So for me, this was a proxy of, showing that I'm probably as good enough as the rest of the applicants that you're getting.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
the third thing was that really spend time on your essays and resume. Like this is basically your sales pitch. It should be crisp. It should be differentiating. And that is actually your non-verbal ticket to the admit. So anybody who reads your essays and resumes, and most of the time it's actually students who's reading these. So, and we review 30, 40 applications in a day. So you really need to be extremely standout and extremely crisp. So I think that art is, you should spend probably the bulk of your time on this.
Okay.
And and then the last thing is about, the verbal part of it, which is the interviews. So never go cold into an interview. Like always have mocks. I remember we had two mocks. I had my friends do a few mocks with me. I had a few mocks done by alums. So like even before I literally went into my first interview, I was like 7 interviews down. So I think those are the 4 tips which I would recommend to anybody who's thinking about an MBA from ISB.
Awesome. And this is my last question. This is my last question for people who are looking at establishing a career in this direction and they think uh, they work for 5 to 7 years and now they're moving back to academic side, maybe for the last time in their life. Like after
Yeah,
an MBA, very rarely people will do PhDs and other programs. What was your typical day at ISB, Pulkit? How does it look like?
interesting. Good question. I mean, I'll give you the sanitized version of this.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was very different for me pre-placement versus when I got my job and towards the fag end of the program. Last 4 months were very different from the first 7 months. So there were party stories, but there was also crazy amount of hours spent in the first 5 months trying to sort out grades, jobs. To me, like as I said, like I personally feel I'm a very balanced person, and to me, an MBA program was also all about balance. Like I was hearing all of these crazy stories that you can choose only 2 out of 3, either grades, social life, or sleep. But honestly, I wanted all three. Like, and I'm not exaggerating, but on an average, I think I slept not less than 7 hours every day. I went to all the parties that I wanted to, and I also covered my bases academically. And I had the same time as everybody else. My secret was, I mean, just scheduling and prioritization. I was almost robotic in my life, but like my day started pretty early. Like I get up usually, even now I get up between 6 to 7 a.m. Like my day starts with a workout. I need my endorphins to get me focused. I always choose morning classes, like because somehow I'm of that firm belief that get your shit done and then focus on everything else. So which is why, pardon my language, but my day started with 4 hours, 5 hours of classes, and I was usually done by 10:30. Sorry, 1:30, and after that it was a quick lunch, and then again I front load everything. So after lunch, immediately I just used to do all my assignments, pre-reads, and I just wanted to get free. And I just used to email my study group that, okay, guys, here's this is what I've done. Let's chat in the evening, and whatever allocate. So evenings for me then were club meetings, like a consulting club or study group meetings, or basically work-related chats is what I prefer to do in the evenings, because like when I was usually I was done with my pre-work and everything.
Okay.
Dinner was 8, and then probably 2 hours for drinks, social time, calling home. And I used to be off by 10:30, 11, ready for the next day. And then post placement, it all went haywire. It was just about getting through classes and then rushing through my assignments and then rushing to the nearest party or rushing to help out other people who haven't been placed yet with their preps.
Sounds like
So
it was
yeah,
both fun and exposure and great learning, Pulkit.
yeah, it was. I would say it was the. I mean, it's probably one of the best years of my life. Like I really, really enjoyed. And you know what? I was really looking forward to going back to my 5-year reunion this year in Hyderabad, but I don't think that's happening. So maybe next year, once this
Yeah.
pandemic is over.
Did your wife also stay on campus with you, Pulkit?
No, she didn't, but she used to come. I mean, one of the advantages of being in India is like Delhi, Hyderabad is 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Pulkit. It has been a pleasure knowing you. It has been a pleasure actually knowing your stories and seeing you grow throughout the years. I'm going to bother you a lot in times to come. You are somebody who can actually add a lot of value to student community, Pulkit. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.